Thank you so much, everyone attending this session. My name is Cecilia McGow, and I'm from the nonprofit Students with Psychosis. Students with Psychosis is a nonprofit that focuses on empowering college students living with psychosis through community building and collaboration. I'm hearing some background. Just want to make sure everyone else is good with audio. I can switch to my audio.
Are you both in the same room?
We're in the same building. I just changed to Bluetooth. Is this better?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. All right. And just another tech question before we get started. So I'm getting it where on my end of things is having me accept people entering in the room. So Angela, will you be doing that?
Yes, I will be.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Going to go ahead and get started then. All right. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming to today's session. My name is Cecilia McGow, and I'm the Executive Director for the nonprofit Students with Psychosis. Students with Psychosis is a nonprofit that focuses on empowering college students and advocates worldwide through community building and collaboration. Today, I'm going to be introducing one of our powerhouse advocates and executive board members, Maddie Jericho. Maddie is also a comic book writer and a singer and just a really amazing human being. Maddie, would you like to introduce yourself a bit?
Yes. Hi, I'm Maddie Jericho, or Mads Jericho. I am coming to you guys all the way from, previously from Indianapolis, Indiana, currently in New Haven, hanging out with the rest of Students with Psychosis. I feel like Cecilia put it pretty well. I podcast, I write comic books, I do some street performing with singing. I like to keep myself really busy, so.
Thank you so much, Maddie, for sharing with us. And Maddie will be sharing their lived experience perspective of what it's like to be a college student living with psychosis. We're going to go ahead and dive into it. The first question I have for you, Maddie, is how has community connecting with fellow peers assisted in your recovery journey?
I feel like having a community when it comes to recovery has been life-saving. I benefited greatly from inpatient treatment, which when I went, it was a very group-focused thing. And then after college, I was kind of lost. I didn't really know where I was going to go. And quarantine hit, and the main thing that popped up during that time was Students with Psychosis. And I found an amazing community there that I was able to feel like I was mattered. I was doing something. I was doing things that I never thought I could do, that I've always wanted to do. And it just really helped me ground myself and realize I'm not really alone in this kind of fight.
You're not alone, Maddie. And let me just say, it's been wonderful getting to know you throughout the years with Students with Psychosis. I remember back in 2020 when we started the virtual programming, you were one of the first students that joined our virtual programming. And it's been such a privilege getting to know you throughout the years and seeing you also grow within your advocacy journey. All right, going into the next question, when we're talking about community and community building, because I know as a person living with schizophrenia, finding fellow peers has been very important to me. How can community building be more accessible, particularly for students?
I think when it comes to community building, it is a fine line to walk. I have a background of 4 years in teaching, primarily kindergarten and then up to middle school. But with my teaching experience, I've learned that the best way to really focus on community is assume that you really know nothing about the people that you're trying to help build this community for. When we go into community building, it's very easy to hear someone's identity or a trait that defines them and start categorizing them immediately. And that can be one of the most harmful and distancing things that you can do. I think when it comes to building community, it has to be collaborative. You have to engage with the people that you're helping, because that's what defines I'm here to assist you and support you versus I'm trying to save you. And nobody needs a savior. You just need help. nobody needs a person to come in and say like, oh, you're sick and you're experiencing this. They just need someone to like help them find the resources, give them the resources, lift them up while they're lifting themselves up. That was one of the most important things I learned during teaching, is that while I'm teaching my students, they're also teaching me at the same time of how their lives are, how they respond to things, how can I adjust my lesson to better accommodate them. Yeah.
Very well said, Maddie. And that goes right into our next question when it comes to what are some additional perspectives, barriers, or hurdles you experienced related to intersecting identities?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest intersecting identity is the very face value one, is that I am Black. And so the way that that merges with my psychosis is very unique to me. Every day I have to leave my house not as just a Black person, or not just as a person who experiences psychosis, but as a Black person with psychosis, someone whose psychosis is Black. And it is a very long day of when I get symptomatic to kind of balance how much of myself can I be today? How much of myself can I show off? Because I can't really be all of it all at once, because either I'm a bit too scary to look at for whichever reason, whichever way it all leans together more, or my symptoms will go ignored because of my skin tone. They'll think if I go into a flat effect, it's, oh, I just have a attitude because I'm Black and that's just how they are. It's very easy to be talked over, talked for, or just completely ignored because of how one's racial identity can merge with their intersecting mental neurodivergence. That's the word. Also, just having AAVE as a first language is it makes a lot more barriers than you think it would. Growing up with a bit of a Midwestern accent and also speaking in a typically Black way, it makes it harder for people to understand, especially when you're trying to advance yourself through higher education and through a job and into a medical institution to get actual help.
When talking about intersecting identities, what can the psychosis community learn from other marginalized communities or historically underrepresented communities?
Oh, I think there is a lot to learn all the time. As you know, as being a teacher, there's always a lot to learn. And I think the most important thing is that it is a long fight. And I use the word fight very intentionally, in the sense that when there is a fight, sometimes you lose. Sometimes you come out a little worse for wear, even if you do win. There is things that you kind of trade back and forth. And it is difficult. And as a subjugated person, you kind of have to represent yourself. I learned that a lot from just growing up Black. I never had any of my peers of other racial identities to really rely on, especially time when I was in school, to really stand up for me. So I had to be the one to do it. But at the same time, another thing to take in is that you're never really alone in the fight, as I said earlier, because no movement is done by a singular person, because no issue that affects you only affects you. There's always at least someone else out there that it affects. And I think that's one of the most important things, that it's going to be a fight. You're going to have to fight for yourself, but you're not going to always be alone in that fight, are the most important things I think there are to learn from other marginalized communities.
Powerful words. Thank you so much, Maddie. And when it comes to have different aspects of your personal experience, identity, how's it impacted your ability in accessing accommodations, whether it's in the workplace or in like a school atmosphere?
Ooh, okay. So the primary thing is definitely poverty. I grew up homeless in Indianapolis, disowned by family for just reasons of they didn't have the time or feel like they had the time to deal with me and everything that was going on with me. So there was this constant fear of, I can't be hospitalized, because if I get hospitalized, they're going to find out I'm homeless. If I find out I'm homeless, I'm going to go to foster care, then I'm never going to get help. I think there is this constant fear and also shame with intersecting identities, especially as a person of color with mental health, because so much of our history in America especially has been, we don't have the luxury to work on our mental health. We have to just survive to the next day. We have to get by and work and hope we can make it. And I feel like we're now moving into the time in history where we're able to do that. And it's just a really, really hard adjustment. Going back to poverty, I think another one of the things was I grew up in the city. Definitely, I saw New York and Brooklyn for the first time this weekend. So definitely not a city now I know, but in the sense that I could leave my home or wherever I was staying and walk to a hospital or walk to a store or walk to a clinic and get help. When I went to college, I went to Hanover College, which is a very rural environment. The campus was 1,500 people. And if you wanted to go to the store or go to a hospital, you had to link up with somebody to get a ride that was 30 minutes away or the next town over or the next 2 towns over. And it made the fight for mental health and recovery so much more difficult because I would just get out of classes, I would get out of work. And if I had the time to make it out to the psychiatrist to get my prescription refilled, it's a 2-hour drive to the next town. And so I'm just like, I just don't have the time. I don't have anyone who can take me. I'm just exhausted. And it's so much easier to just kind of just give up because how poverty affects you.
That's such a very important topic to highlight. It's not a good situation when taking care of your mental health becomes a luxury. It's important that we're addressing housing insecurity and such. Also, I want to direct the audience members. There is a session Q&A. So if you have any questions for Maddie, make sure to interact in that session Q&A or in the chat. I do have some more questions for you, Maddie. Another question I have here is, what systemic forces, obstacles prevent people from getting accommodations? So we were talking about housing insecurity and such. I wonder if you wanted to build on that point.
Oh yeah, most definitely. With there, where to begin? The systematic forces, there is just, it feels like there's an endless list. It feels like there's a constant mountain that you're climbing because you don't really know how much is in your way until you actually start facing it. It feels like when it came to getting that accessibility, getting those accommodations and whatnot, being homeless, it was virtually impossible because it was kind of a balancing act as a teenager. I couldn't let people know too much or I would lose what little I did have of my freedom. And it felt like I was kind of wagering my freedom against my stability, and it just wasn't a fair fight. And I feel like nobody was helping me kind of balance that out. Nobody really cared what I wanted. It was kind of, oh, we need to save you by our means. And it was just, it didn't feel like saving. But also I think another thing is that the only reason I got accommodations and the recovery help that I did get was through college. And I honestly almost didn't go to college. I had applied to Hanover, I was accepted, I got my scholarships in. And then at the time I was staying with my father, who I've not since talked to. And I was supposed to move in that weekend. And he said, I'm not going to take you. And the trip from Indianapolis to Hanover is not a long one in the grand scheme of things, but it's a lot longer when you don't have a car or reliable transport. And so I was just stuck in a house that I didn't really live in with no way to escape. And I didn't know what to do. And they just said, join the military. I was like, well, I don't want to do that. But luckily, one of the outreach people, she was doing a college tour in Speedway, a little town inside of Indianapolis. And she's like, I'll just pick you up on the way. And she drove me back. She helped me to move my stuff in and got me set up at Hanover, got me even another scholarship. And that's the only reason I was able to get those accommodations, was through the kindness of strangers. And I feel like while that is a great story and all, and it's very nice, and I like to think back on it, warms my heart, that shouldn't be the norm. We shouldn't have to rely on just people going out of their way to do everything for you. It should be built in that you can overcome these obstacles and get what you need. And it shouldn't just be, oh, only when you go to college you can get them. It should be available to everybody readily.
100% agree with you there when it comes to supporting students and making sure that they have that access to education. It shouldn't be relying on individual support. There should be more support built in. And another question having for you, Maddie, is what is the most helpful experience you personally have had with accessing accommodations?
Yeah. So the most the most helpful thing I had was when I went to inpatient. It wasn't the actual inpatient trip, but it was something that happened there. I went there my junior year of undergrad, and I was just in a really dark place, slipping into addiction, and eventually just caved to all the coercion and pressure and said, "Fine, just take me to inpatient." And while I was there was one day where I woke up and I tried to go to breakfast, and I just spiraled into an episode, and it got very ugly. And I was taken back to my room. I was basically straddled back to my room. Um, and while I was there freaking out, the only nurse who was on staff that was Black came into my room. And she was able to sit there and talk with me in a way that none of the other nurses could talk to me, because even though we all spoke English, we didn't speak the same kind of English, and we didn't speak the same contextual version of English. And she told me, like, hey, I know that this is difficult. I don't understand exactly what's going on, but if you don't pull it together, they're never going to let you out of here. And it was just a very real conversation of kind of this maternal protection, that I had rarely ever experienced, of someone who just genuinely cared and really wanted to make sure that somebody who looked like me, that looked like her, could succeed and could strive. And yeah, I think that was the most helpful thing, of someone who understood my culture, recognized my struggle, and was able to kind of balance between my symptoms and my background.
Representation matters so much when it comes to in the healthcare fields, and I'm glad that you were able to connect with someone there. But at the same time, I'm sorry that you went through that experience. Another question we have for you is, how can we transform environments and communities to be more empowering to people living with psychosis?
I think the most important way to transform those environments is, I touched on it earlier, but it's to make the accommodations the norm. You shouldn't have to go through every single hoop just to get the accommodation. You shouldn't have to just attend college or go to the military or get a job to get those accommodations. They should be readily available. It shouldn't be the baseline for life to just be harder. If there's an accommodation for it, it should be offered to everybody, in my opinion, regardless of their standpoint in society. I like to say that the whole world should be a little bit more psychotic in a way, in the sense that everyone should be perceiving the world or experiencing the world in a way that you get the same accommodations as anyone else. I think is really important. Because why are we wasting our time making things harder than they have to be? It feels like really roundabout, right?
I agree with you there. I think that we all can benefit from a more mental health friendly world, more of a mental health friendly environment in the workplace, at school, and in community spaces. So adding on to that, when it comes to accommodations, what are some accommodations in school or work that you find underutilized?
Well, while teaching, I learned all about accommodations because I've had very little when I was in college. And I feel like one of the most important ones were just having extended time. I spend a lot of time having to reread questions, because when I go into a testing environment, my symptoms act up, and then it takes a lot more to focus on what I'm reading. I have to read it multiple times. By that time, I'm timed out. Too much time. But I think more time, extended time, is really important. And also small group and individual testing. It's very easy, with me personally, that my symptoms will latch on to any given stimulus environment and will just send me down a rabbit hole. And I think having a small group testing environment or an individual testing environment even really helps me focus, where I'm not focused on how everyone else is doing. Oh, someone just finished before me. Oh no, I'm falling behind. It really helps me ground myself, because I'm also not afraid of people looking at me when I'm doing some of my stranger ticks during a test.
Thank you for sharing with us, Maddie. I'm going to be looking at the Q&A now when it comes to the questions we have here. And if anyone else has any questions for Maddie, pop them into the Q&A. The question we have here is, I love your statement about not needing to be saved. Can you please say more about what strategies or actions by care providers, friends, or institutions have supported you most?
Oh, okay. What strategies? Actually, this is me having to reread the question as per usual. So I think and I hope this answers your question. I think the best thing was when people met me as an equal. And it felt more like a journey that we were going on together. With my current therapist, who I love my current therapist, it feels very much more like the previous ones I've had. It's like, well, we're going to do this for you. This one, my current therapist, it feels more like, how do you want to go about this? And what can we do? Just letting them know that you're also involved in it. Like, I have just as much stake as you do. I currently work as an RBT. I do ABA therapy for kids who are on the autism spectrum. And I carry that a lot forward with me, of like, when my kid is learning, I'm learning. When we're doing the curriculum, when he's doing curriculum, I'm doing curriculum. And we are both making these gains together. And it's at the point where they accomplish something like, good job. And they say, we did it. I'm like, yes, we did. But yeah.
It's really beautiful that you have like both the perspective of being a student, but also a teacher as well. I think that when we talk about people who are experiencing psychosis in the classroom, it's also important to address that teachers get psychosis as well. So I know we're talking about like the student perspective, but do you mind adding a little bit more on what's an accommodation that a teacher might have when it comes to teaching as a person living with psychosis?
Oh, in general, there aren't enough accommodations in the world for teachers. I feel like, oof, where to begin? Teaching is very unique in the sense that there's a lot of different parties that have their hands in the pot. I feel like on a more micro level, the best accommodation to have with teaching is to have a strong community where when I was teaching, I was never fully alone. I had my teaching partners, I had my grade level team and my house team. I feel like that was a very important thing to do, where I could look at my lesson plan and say, did I do this right? And bring it next door. And they say, no, and then help me work through it. I feel like having, once again, a community is what really saves the day, especially with teaching. Teaching is a very communal based thing. If you've ever been to kindergarten, which I think most people have.
Thank you for sharing with us, Maddie. I got a few other questions over here as well for you. When it comes to, we were talking about making workplace and also school atmospheres more accommodating. What would your advice be for someone who is looking for community or finding a friend as someone living with psychosis?
Oh, so someone who is looking for a community experiencing psychosis?
Yeah, so looking for community or just trying to find a friend, because people who live with psychosis, loneliness is a very prevalent topic for us.
I feel like we are in a very glorious age of technology where you have, I always say, omnipotence in the palm of your hand. And I feel like there are so many different online communities, of course, not all of them great, that you can find. When I first left college, I got really into gaming and I would game with some streamers. And that was my first community where that's how I actually developed my name, because my gamer tag was Madhouse and they started calling me Mads or Maddie as a nickname. And that eventually became my name for real. So it was things like that. I feel like just there's a safety in being in your home, but also being out in the world at the same time through the screen. And I feel like it is kind of demonized at times or underutilized. And I feel like there's a lot to gain there just by finding what you're interested in and then engaging with that online. And of course, for me, finding students with psychosis and engaging in activism and helping people like me who have psychosis.
That's a great point. And also, like, just, oh my goodness, I'm just so thankful for being in a time in history where we do have like access to the internet and can form a community. Because I know as someone living with schizophrenia, I've struggled with isolation and loneliness and such. So I think that you put that in a very good way. And speaking of students with psychosis, I know that we have over 160 hours worth of virtual programming every month. Is there a particular type of programming with SWP that you enjoy the most?
Creative nights. It's always creative nights.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, I want to take this moment to thank you both for taking the time to share with us your experiences. And I want to encourage everyone to continue the conversation and question Q&As in the chat. And again, thank you both so much. This is a very great learning experience. I'm gonna put some questions in the chat myself and connect. So but definitely use Hoopa to connect, everyone. Thank you again. Hope you have a great day. And the conference is going to continue to our next session. Take care.